Justin Trudeau is a racist and he discriminates against people. What we're taking a look at today is the discrimination that he's taken against immigrants. Now, most Canadians are okay with this in the sense that, hey, we've had our gates flooded and that should not be okay. So this is a big reversal by Justin Trudeau. And no, it doesn't make you a racist. I'm just having fun with the words. But Justin Trudeau does discriminate, specifically aside from immigrants, which they are extremely upset about, specifically talking with the Liberal House Speaker, Greg Fergus, who discriminates against the visually impaired, which is the perfect segue into reminding you, if you haven't yet already, or if this is the first time that you're seeing this, to sign the petition, link down below in the description or the pinned comment below, to stop Greg Fergus from muting the microphone. You go to stopmutingthemic.ca. You'll be directed here. Now you can click on the top right, sign now, or in the middle of the button, or you can scroll all the way down to the end and you can sign there as well. And you can tell your MP. I've provided a template for you. You can copy and paste it. And then you can also click on this map and see who your local MP is. And you can send them that letter. Very, very simple. But when you click sign now, it brings you to our comments. Petition E5170, where it talks about the discrimination of muting the mic towards the visually impaired community here in Canada. I never thought in my life that the Liberal government would discriminate against the visually impaired here in Canada, but here we are, a failing progressive country. Stop the discrimination, sign the petition. As far as how many signatures we got, 5,595, almost 5,600 so far. Not too shabby. So I appreciate if you guys shared the link more than you already have, of course. But thank you to everybody who has signed the petition. And if you haven't yet already, go sign it, go sign it, go sign it. Stop the discrimination. All right. Now we're going to talk about immigration because Justin Trudeau has pulled back on immigration significantly. Minimum 20% of immigration is going to be cut back, which is pretty wild. So we got two videos here. The first is actually Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, who talks about the plan to bar international students from medical schools starting in 2016. But then we got to talk about the federal policy, which is going to be cutting back on immigration.
Yeah, right. But today, we're also announcing that our government will prioritize med school seats for Ontario students. Starting in the fall of 2026, all Ontario medical schools will be required to allocate at least 95% of all undergraduate seats to residents of Ontario, with the other 5% reserved for students from the rest of Canada. And you know something?
So we have a massive medical staff shortage here in Canada, like insanely. And this is where targeted immigration would actually come into play. But let me know what you guys think about that announcement down below. I've shared my opinion. Now I would love to know yours. And then we got to talk about Mark Miller, the current failed Liberal immigration minister who's under fire immensely for being a racist. I mean, why discriminate against immigrants, right? You opened the gates, you said, come on, everybody, come on in, let's go, rush in. And now they're saying, whoa, get out, no more. Kind of a impressive about turn that I never would have suspected by a progressive Liberal government. But here we are, it's happening.
Begin with that major cut to the Liberal government's immigration targets, a significant reversal from its plan announced just a year ago. Canada was expected to admit about 500,000 permanent residents in 2025 and 2026. Under this new plan, those numbers have been slashed to 395,000 in 2025 and 380,000 in 2026, with plans for that level to continue to drop into 2027. The temporary population is also going to drop under this plan. In both 2025 and 26, Ottawa will decrease the number of temporary workers by a total of more than 445,000 people. Overall, these sweeping changes will lead to an overall population decline of 0.2%. That's about 80,000 fewer people in Canada. Opposition leaders say this is an admission of failure.
What the Liberals are doing is, and Justin Trudeau is doing, is acknowledging that he messed up. He's acknowledging that there's been problems in the immigration system, but more so that there's been serious problems with his lack of action on building adequate housing and investing sufficiently in the healthcare system.
With his own MPs working to throw him out, and less than a year from the carbon tax election, Trudeau has suddenly admitted that radical, uncontrolled immigration and policies related to it are partly to blame for joblessness, housing, and healthcare crises.
Immigration Minister Mark Miller joins me now. Minister, thanks for coming in. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on.
You heard the criticism there. This plan is a pretty significant reversal from what we've seen the last number of years. Does this mean the government has messed up?
I'll address the fact. I heard Pierre Poilievre. I've heard, and he's an immature guy, an even more immature analysis of the situation. He still doesn't have a slogan to go for it. So when he comes up with a slogan, maybe we'll talk about that. And he'll have to present a plan to Canadians. This is a plan. It represents a reasonable plan that we put in front of Canadians as part of our multi-year level planning, not only for temporary residents, but not only for permanent residents, but for temporary residents. We set some ambitious goals coming out of COVID for population growth, to make sure that the immigrant population was important, to making sure the economy didn't go into a recession. Bank of Canada, IMF has recognized that, but it's come with some challenges in and around housing and around affordability. We obviously acknowledge that, and I think Canadians have some legitimate questions about the increase and the rapidity of the increase. When I was put in this position a little over a year ago by the Prime Minister, he knew my thoughts on the matter, and I promised to the public in my first cabinet meeting that I wouldn't be dogmatic about this. And I took a look at that with my team, took a look at that with cabinet, and proposed some things that are reasonable to Canadians, what we are hearing from Canadians. So this is a plan that shows that we've listened to Canadians. It's a reasonable plan for the next 3 years, and it is a plan for managed migration in a situation where Canada is not producing natural population growth. There's a whole discussion to be had around that. But we need immigrants, not only for the economy, but to make sure that we have a healthy society. We're a country built on immigration.
Right.
But Canadians have had that legitimate set of questions over the last little while. The consensus in and around immigration is one that is under threat in Canada. I still think we have it. But I don't want to get myself into a situation like a country to the south of us or other countries in Europe where that immigration consensus is broken.
You failed. The answer to the first question was yes, sir. I have failed. That's the answer. Not all of this nonsense. You failed. Right? It's been a horrible, sorry, my alarm went off. That's my reminder to tell you to go sign the petition. Link down below in the description or the pinned comment below, or type into the interweb, stopmutingthemic.ca. This guy has failed tremendously, man. Like, nobody has ever failed for immigration in Canada as much as this guy.
And this is a plan that brings forward something that's reasonable for all Canadians, including newcomers.
But it's a shift from a plan that, as you mentioned, was about driving population growth, driving economic growth, to now you're essentially trying to engineer, or I don't know if you're trying to engineer, but the consequence of it is population decline over the next couple of years. I mean, that's not just a slowdown of what was there. That's a bit of a reversal, right? So, is that an admission that where things were going was not only frame the consensus, but was just the wrong path for Canada?
I think the Prime Minister was quite clear today, David, that we own the fact that we didn't get the mix right. That isn't to criticize the quality of the immigrants that have come to this country. The skills that we require and the points that we require for people to become permanent residents is something that is not easy, and it is selective. Permanent residency is something that is hard to get, so too Canadian citizenship. It should remain so. But it also needs to be tailored towards the needs of the economy and factor in the impact that can have on things like affordability, on things specifically like housing. I think also in the temporary residence space, there has been a significant growth over the last few years, right, to 7% of the population. And I acted quite swiftly to slash in international students and the programs that support them, and probably got a little overheated. And that's a responsibility that falls squarely on the shoulders of provinces and the institutions that they regulate. There's a lot of work to be done here. The portrait that I put forward today, I think, is more complete than it was last year, and is one that really shows a snapshot of where we are going in the next 3 years. And I think fundamentally it's reasonable, and it shows we're listening to Canada.
I mean, we've talked a lot about the international student issue, and I know there became a reliance on institutions to get tuition from abroad to compensate for underfunding provincially, but it was the federal government who approved the numbers to come in, right? So there is a shared burden there. But on getting the mix right, the economic numbers are going down quite substantially, the economic immigrants. And we've seen some concern already from provinces like Newfoundland and Labrador and New Brunswick, where they're relying on immigration because of the acute population challenges in the East Coast. The total economic numbers are now by about 70,000 a year. I mean, that's a significant hit in the labor supply. Susan Holt, who just won the election, said there's not a long-term care home in New Brunswick that can operate without immigrants, and we need them to build houses. I mean, what do you think the ripple effect of that decline in the economic class will mean.
Well, what happens in terms of the proportion of the economic class is that it is still significant, close to 60%. It's what the consensus of economic actors, chambers of commerce have been asking us.
But in raw numbers, it is down.
But the raw
right?
numbers,
Yeah.
there are drops. What we are also doing is telling provinces that you haven't been responsible over your provincial nominee programs, where provinces come and bring in immigrants and then criticize the federal government federally for bringing in too many. We're taking that power back and making sure that any managed discussion about immigration in this country is done in cooperation with the federal government, where we ensure that the provinces are actually exercising their jurisdiction, whether it's the need to take a responsible position with respect to asylum seekers, or the need to build more houses, or tailor programs. We're not going to prevent provinces from growing in areas, but we're also asking them to be responsible. I get wildly contradictory letters from the government of Ontario, the government of Alberta. They speak publicly about one thing, but through the back door they tell me to do something else. That's not fair to Canadians, and Canadians are looking at us saying, put that aside. Get your acts together and work with provinces to make sure that we have an immigration system that makes sense. So we want to exercise that power. That comes with great responsibility. And I don't need to quote Uncle Ben or Luke chapter 12:48 to prove that. But the reality is that there is some responsibility.
He does it anyways.
Properly, and we're taking that back.
But if you reduce the number of economic immigrants coming in, either through the provincial nominee program or just the overall program that you're using, I have heard federal ministers talk about, we need people to meet skill gaps in construction to build the homes that are desperately short of. We need people to work in healthcare. I mean, whatever's happening with the provincial nominees program, there is now a smaller pool of people coming in, and those shortages and those needs are still very acute. So how do you solve for those problems when you're taking these steps to reduce the overall numbers?
I think in Canada we have the luxury that perhaps we take for granted of having a well-trained domestic pool that can fill a lot of those positions.
Yeah, dude, you stopped Canadians from going to work during the blip, and then you brought in a bunch of temporary foreign workers. So many so that at these temporary or these immigrant student visa protests that you saw pop up on the East Coast and in Winnipeg like a month ago or something like that, they were literally saying that they rescued Canadians because during the blip, Canadians were too afraid to work, so they filled those jobs. That's not at all true, man. The government blocked people from working certain jobs, and then they flooded the gates with temporary foreign workers who scooped up those jobs, right? And like, there was obviously a very big bias when it came to hiring individuals for those jobs, because as you can see, like Tim Hortons predominantly abused this system. And this has even been brought up by Justin Trudeau himself, right?
I think we have relied too heavily on immigration, perhaps creating a depressive effect on salaries in certain areas. It's no doubt that you're absolutely right in some areas like construction and healthcare, where we will have to be surgical and make sure that we are bringing in a steady flow of people to work in the healthcare area. We have people, an aging population. That's why we need a younger population. Right. But we also need to take care of those people because they help build this country. We also, in the construction area, where we have a lower proportion of people that are from immigrant populations, make sure that we are bringing in, because we can't trade people fast enough to build all the infrastructure that we've promised to build. So there will still be a space for surgical targeted immigration. We still need to get it right. But let's also realize that this plan that I'm putting forward is roughly the same that it was in 2020. So still ambitious, but one that is reasonable for Canadians.
But, there's been some analysis. Scotiabank, their chief economist, Derek Holt, says that Canada, in his view, has completely botched the immigration file for several years now. Is what he's saying, that it was the massive surge sort of post-COVID, and now the sort of fairly aggressive pullback. And however it changes in the future, because I know you signaled there will come a time when it can increase. He's suggesting that it's been chaotic, and it would suggest to immigrants, well, maybe you can't count on stability on this policy in Canada, and they might choose other places. I mean, how do you respond to that sort of criticism here?
Look, I'll let people take the positions that they want to take. I have had the pleasure of speaking to a number of economists, not just the ones at the Bank of Nova Scotia. They have differing views on this. Mm-hmm. I respect them equally. The ones that the set of cards that I have to deal with are in the present, and we have to give Canadians a proper snapshot of the next 3 years and be reasonable at things. I think we've acknowledged the fact that in certain areas, temporary migration in particular, things got overheated. But any responsible government is expected to adjust, and that's what we're doing today.
Right. So one of the things you said today is that this plan will reduce the housing supply gap by about 670,000 units overall, because we'll see net population decline and things like this as people leave. You mentioned off the top concerns over the fraying consensus on immigration, which has been a strength of this country and a binding feature in this country. And people like the Migrants' Rights Network say today that this is essentially feeding into that this policy shift scapegoats migrants for some of these problems that we're seeing on housing and job pressures. What are your thoughts there?
I think that is absolutely not the case. I think what we need to do is to make sure that the volumes are ones that are acceptable, because they are playing into the questioning of very legitimate programs, whether it's the humanitarian envelope that we're very proud of in welcoming now well over 53,000 Afghans, thousands and thousands of Syrians, Ukrainians in the numbers that are historic, 300,000. But those decisions, which are very important, and I don't regret them, have had impacts on our ability and the questioning of our other programs. So we don't live in utopia. We have to take grounded decisions in reality, and that comes sometimes with trade-offs. We also shouldn't stymie debate or call each other names when we're having reasonable discussions, because people do have different views, and part of building that consensus, the contrary of unanimity, is something that requires some heated debates at times, and even when you disagree. So willing to continue to have those debates and even adjust where necessary.
Okay, adjust where necessary. Just a final point on.
I mean, the debates about this would be incredible, but every single time they have a debate, you have conservatives get silenced by the House Speaker, which again is a phenomenal reminder to click the link down below in the description or the pinned comment below to stop muting the mic.ca and sign that petition.
On the immigration changes, what's the trigger point for where the numbers might go back up? Because you set 500,000 for a reason. Dominic Barton, who had advised the government previously, was part of this aggressive push to try to grow the Canadian population that was accepted as a necessity for the country's long-term economic future. What is the target when you will know it's time to change course again in a more upward direction, or will that ever happen?
Good, fair point. There are a number of factors that obviously we control, some that we don't. The one that I will be keenly looking at is the temporary resident pool in this country, whether the policies that we put into place that are significant are actually yielding the numbers that we expect them to yield. I won't get a sense. We have a sense of success with respect to international students, thanks to the decisions we took about a year ago. But we won't have a good sense of things until the second quarter, roughly, of 2025 with respect to the reductions that we are anticipating. So that's a number that I'll be watching quite intensely. But there are obviously other factors, economic factors, that you can never fully predict, that we should, and Canadians ask us to be nimble on and adjusting if we need to.
Okay, while you're here, I have to ask you about what's happening inside the Liberal caucus. I'm sure you anticipate it. You've spoken a lot about it the last couple of days. The Prime Minister was asked to think about his future yesterday in that caucus meeting. He said he'd take it back and reflect on it, and today he said he was staying well in advance of the October 28th date that the people who signed this letter that was presented in caucus yesterday, an unsigned version
They're
of it.
going to vote in favor of non-confidence.
Play some clips of some of the reaction from people today and just get your reaction on the other side. Just listen to this.
Do you feel like took enough time to reflect?
No, I don't. But I don't think that he felt that he needed to reflect at all. I think his mind was made up. He listened, but he wasn't swayed. I wouldn't call it delusional, but he's seeing something that I don't see, that my constituents don't see.
I think it's disrespectful. I'm just disappointed. I think that we deserved a sit down. You know, I heard about it when I was sitting in committee. I was like, no, he couldn't have come back that quick, but he did. So, you know what? We'll just have to deal with that.
So, Mark Miller, I know you're a staunch supporter of the Prime Minister. You've known him for a long time, since before you were both in politics. What do you make of the reaction there from some of the MPs who we know were part of this effort, and where does this leave the caucus now?
Well, I think first it was, I'd rather not be talking about this, and I've been quite harsh towards my colleagues that have been, some have been doing things in to the back rooms as opposed to saying to safe. All I asked is that they say it to his face, and they did. I respect them for having done that in an honest way, and what I saw during those conversations, even though I can't share them on air, are people that profoundly respect each other, even though we disagree with the approach. We're all squarely focused on defeating a very toxic Pierre Poilievre in the next election. How we do it,
the big bad guy, Pierre.
Some people don't obviously support the Prime Minister, but I don't think anyone should think that we're all fighting. I've had more fights with the Prime Minister in 40 years than probably anyone. It's always been to his face, and we sort things out. I'm not always right, and he's not always right, but we figured it out. A professional relationship with colleagues in caucus, where you're running the country. I think Canadians expect us to be mature, sort it out in front of each other, have honest conversations. Again, this is their deadline, not his. The Prime Minister's mind is made up. It doesn't mean, though, that he is insensitive to some of the comments that were made, and doesn't have further reflection to do on some of the substantive points that were made, and made by people who do still support him about what we need to do. And that's a constant process that we have to do in caucus. It's very healthy. It's actually healthy for our democracy, but it has to be done privately, so we have the freedom to elaborate policy and all stand lockstep behind the Prime Minister. I think a lot of good came out of that meeting. In fact, from those colleagues that I've spoken to that I suspect signed the letter, they did feel that the conversation was frank. So I think there was something positive coming out of that meeting.
But do you think it ends it? Because a lot of them, like Wayne Long and others, have wanted this caucus meeting since June after Toronto St. Paul's. They finally get it, and less than 24 hours later, it's a no. And I just wonder if you think this ends the process, because some of the plotters, as I've been calling them, felt yesterday should have been the beginning of something rather than the end of something. Do you think this is over?
I think at the end of the day, it's their call, not mine. All we ask is that we have these conversations in private, to our faces, and in a respectful way. And after yesterday, I have full confidence that we'll continue to do that.
And not here in a television studio with me. You mean? All right. Immigration Minister Mark Miller, always appreciate the time. Thanks for coming in, sir.
Thanks, David.
But
Yeah, not looking good for him no matter which way you try to spin it. I mean, Justin Trudeau's caucus is imploding, and people are doing collateral damage left, right, and center. And I'll give it to them. They had some leaks in the ship. You had some liberal de facto rebel MPs that said, all right, no, that's it. We're going against you. We're going to the press. And they did somewhat. And then they went into that meeting and they came out after being abused, right? And they said on the reporter, like to the press, they said, where on the doll did Trudeau hurt you? And they said, up here in the brain. He's a good guy, right? We shouldn't go against him. And then, and that's it. But what's going to come of this is what everyone wants to know. What's going to happen? Is Trudeau going to prorogue government? No. I mean, there is a chance, but 99% likely not going to do that. So let's get rid of that one. What's next? Is Trudeau going to step down? Come on. You think Trudeau's going to step down? He's the most narcissistic dude we've ever seen in our entire lives. I mean, he'd be the supervillain of any movie, right? Come on. He's not going to step down. So what else can happen? Well, the Bloc Québécois said that if they don't get old age security by October 29th, they're going to vote in favor of non-confidence. And of course, it's almost October 29th. So let's say the Bloc doesn't get what they want, October 30th, October 31st, whenever following, that date, they say, okay, we're voting for non-confidence. So now they go and they sit down in the House and they vote after question period. You got the Conservatives stand up. You got the Bloc stand up. Do you have these de facto rebel liberal MPs stand up? Possibly. They've threatened that. But keep in mind, these people have been talking about this since June or July, and we've already had 2 votes of non-confidence since then. So it would be very, very close. They would need all of the rebel de factos to stand up unanimously and vote in favor of non-confidence. It would break Canadian history. Like, that would be incredible if we saw that, because that means Trudeau has messed up to the point where when it comes time to vote, if they don't actually get that vote through, if they don't get enough votes to vote in favor of a federal election for a non-confidence, then by the time the voting is done, Justin Trudeau is going to make sure that they don't have a job. So it's a Hail Mary play, and it only is successful if it's successful. If you got 10 of them stand up and the rest don't vote in favor of non-confidence, those 10 that stood up will not have a job 5 minutes beyond that point. It's going to be really bad for them. Justin Trudeau obviously has a pretty good grasp on keeping his cabinet like closed mouth, ferme la bouche, as I like to say, because everyone walked into that cabinet talking a bunch of smack, and then when everyone walked out, again, they were like victims of mental abuse. Just, oh, Trudeau's good. Trudeau's good. Black olive, Trudeau's good. And so it's just like, it's only going to work if they all actually commit to the vote of non-confidence, should there be one. But again, we're not going to know. We're not going to have that answer for a few more days, but it's coming. It is a coming. All right. So in order to make sure that you actually get notified of when the next big announcement does happen, I want you all to smash the like button on this video. It helps grow the channel. It helps push the videos out further. Then if you haven't yet already, smash the subscribe button and then that little bell notification so you can actually be notified of upcoming videos, and make sure it's on all notifications so you get push notifications to your phone or your devices of brand new videos. Thank you so much for watching. I've shared my opinion. I would absolutely love to know yours. I'll see you guys in another video. Bye for now.